Edward III, born on November 11, 1312, came into a world of political tension and uncertainty. As the eldest son of Edward II and Isabella of France, he was heir to a kingdom rife with factional conflicts and a monarchy struggling to assert its authority. His early years were marked by the turbulent reign of his father, whose inability to control the barons and manage foreign relations had left England vulnerable. Edward's mother, Isabella, a French princess, played a crucial role in shaping the young prince's early life. She was intelligent, politically astute, and ambitious, yet her complicated relationship with Edward II would have profound consequences for the boy's future. In 1325, Edward was sent to France to negotiate matters on behalf of his father, an experience that exposed him to international diplomacy at an unusually young age. In 1327, at just 14 years old, Edward III ascended the English throne under tragic circumstances. His father, Edward II, was deposed in a coup led by Isabella and her lover, Roger Mortimer. This transition placed the young king in a delicate position. Formally he was king, but in reality, power was held by his mother and Mortimer, who acted as regents. Edward III's early reign was therefore not about commanding armies or governing the land, it was a subtle game of observation and learning. He witnessed firsthand how alliances were formed, how loyalty could be won or lost, and how power was exercised behind the throne. These formative years shaped him into a ruler who would later combine military prowess with political cunning. By the age of 17, Edward began to assert his authority. In a bold and decisive move in 1330, he orchestrated the arrest of Roger Mortimer, who was executed for treason, effectively ending his mother's political dominance. This daring action marked Edward III's transition from a puppet king to a sovereign ruler, fully in command of England's destiny. Edward's early experiences had instilled in him a profound understanding. The crown was not merely a symbol of authority, it was a tool that required skill, strategy, and sometimes ruthlessness to wield effectively. His reign, which would eventually last 50 years, was about to enter a chapter defined by ambition, warfare, and the creation of a legacy that would echo across centuries. By the early 1330s, Edward III had firmly established himself as England's true sovereign. The dramatic overthrow of Roger Mortimer in 1330 was not merely a personal triumph, it was a signal to the kingdom and the nobility that Edward was no longer a passive figurehead but a king determined to assert his authority. Yet, while political consolidation was important, Edward's ambitions extended far beyond the walls of Westminster. His gaze was fixed across the Channel toward France, where his maternal lineage offered a pretext for claims that would soon ignite one of the most protracted conflicts in European history, the 100 Years' War. Edward's claim to the French throne was not born of simple desire, it was rooted in the complex web of dynastic ties that defined medieval Europe. Through his mother, Isabella, daughter of King Philip IV of France, Edward could assert a right, however contested, to the French crown. France, at the time, was a patchwork of feudal loyalties, its monarchy recently unsettled by internal succession disputes. Edward, understanding the importance of legitimacy, framed his claim not as an act of aggression but as the assertion of a legal and rightful inheritance. Diplomacy and law, however, were merely the prelude to war. By 1337, tensions reached a breaking point. Philip VI of France, wary of Edward's ambitions and eager to assert his own authority, confiscated the Duchy of Aquitaine, a significant English holding in southwestern France. This act was viewed as a direct insult and provocation. Edward responded decisively. England, under his command, would not stand idle. What followed was the opening salvo of the 100 Years' War, a series of intermittent conflicts that would dominate European politics for generations. Edward's military strategy was revolutionary for his time. Unlike many contemporaries who relied heavily on traditional feudal levies and knights, Edward emphasized professional armies, disciplined archers, and strategic maneuvering. The English longbow, in particular, became a symbol of Edward's military innovation. This weapon, wielded with extraordinary skill by the yeomanry, allowed relatively small forces to challenge and often defeat numerically superior French armies. Edward's campaigns showcased not only his tactical brilliance but also a keen understanding of the changing nature of warfare in the 14th century. One of Edward's first major victories came at the Battle of Sluis in 1340, a naval engagement that demonstrated England's emerging naval power. Controlling the channel was essential for transporting troops and supplies, and Edward's decisive action neutralized the French fleet, ensuring that England maintained critical lines of communication and reinforcement. This victory was more than a military success, it was a statement of intent, signaling to Europe that Edward III was not merely a regional monarch but a ruler capable of projecting power far beyond his shores. The following years were punctuated by a series of remarkable military campaigns, each cementing Edward's reputation as a warrior king. In 1346, he launched an ambitious invasion of northern France, culminating in the Battle of Crécy. Here, Edward's innovative tactics and the disciplined use of longbowmen decimated the French knights, whose traditional heavy cavalry charges proved disastrously ineffective. The victory at Crécy was not just a triumph of arms, it was a moment that redefined medieval warfare. Edward had demonstrated that strategy, discipline, and technological adaptation could overcome sheer numerical strength, forever altering the perception of battlefield dominance. Edward's ambitions, however, were not purely military. He understood that war was a tool for both territorial gain and political legitimacy. His campaigns were carefully framed to reinforce his authority at home, bolstering national pride and consolidating loyalty among the English nobility. He cultivated the image of a king who was both protector and conqueror, a monarch whose power was validated by his prowess in the field. This dual approach, military innovation paired with astute political management, would characterize his entire reign. Yet, Edward III's reign was not without its challenges. The Black Death, which struck England and Europe in the late 1340s, posed an unprecedented social and economic crisis. The pandemic decimated populations, disrupted agriculture, and destabilized traditional power structures. Edward's leadership during this period demonstrated remarkable resilience. He maintained military campaigns, administered justice, and implemented fiscal measures to stabilize the kingdom. His ability to navigate both war and plague showcased a king capable of adapting to forces far beyond human control. Edward's personal life, meanwhile, intertwined with his political ambitions. His marriage to Philippa of Hainaut in 1328 had brought not only an alliance with a powerful European house but also a supportive queen renowned for her compassion and political acumen. Philippa's influence extended beyond the domestic sphere. She accompanied Edward on campaigns, acted as a regent in his absence, and became a symbol of dynastic stability. Their union produced numerous children, securing the lineage of the Plantagenet dynasty and reinforcing Edward's long-term claim to the throne. By the mid-1350s, Edward III had solidified his position as one of Europe's most formidable monarchs. His victories on the battlefield, combined with his ability to maintain political stability at home, earned him both respect and fear among his contemporaries. He had transformed England from a kingdom vulnerable to internal strife and foreign intimidation into a nation capable of projecting power and influence across the continent. Edward III's reign was no longer defined solely by his youth or the shadows of his father's failures. It was a period marked by ambition, innovation, and an enduring legacy that would echo through European history. By the 1350s, Edward III had firmly established himself as one of the most formidable monarchs in Europe. His victories at Crécy and Sluis had cemented his reputation as a strategic genius, but Edward knew that true power required more than battlefield triumphs. It demanded political finesse, enduring alliances, and the ability to navigate the complex web of European diplomacy. Edward's campaigns in France were never purely military endeavors. Each campaign was intertwined with careful political maneuvering. The English king understood that his claim to the French throne, while partially rooted in inheritance through his mother Isabella, was contested and fraught with risk. Philip VI and his successors viewed Edward's ambitions as a direct threat to French sovereignty, creating a volatile environment where war and diplomacy were inseparable. Edward, however, was undeterred. He combined his military might with shrewd negotiation, often leveraging truces, marriages, and alliances to strengthen his position. One of Edward's most significant strategies was his use of continental alliances. He fostered connections with the Low Countries, Brittany, and parts of the Holy Roman Empire, ensuring that France would rarely face a united front against England. These alliances were not merely defensive, they provided troops, resources, and legitimacy to Edward's campaigns. In doing so, he skillfully transformed a dynastic dispute into a pan-European conflict, expanding the scope and influence of the 100 Years' War beyond the Anglo-French rivalry. The Battle of Poitiers in 1356 exemplified Edward's tactical brilliance and the effectiveness of his alliances. Edward, leading a well-coordinated force that included contingents from allied territories, confronted a much larger French army. Through careful preparation, disciplined deployment of longbowmen, and clever use of terrain, Edward achieved a decisive victory. Perhaps most strikingly, the English forces captured King John II of France, sending shockwaves across Europe. This victory not only strengthened Edward's bargaining power in negotiations but also solidified his image as a king capable of extraordinary military and political feats. Edward III's reign, however, was not solely defined by warfare. He demonstrated remarkable administrative skill, reforming the English government, streamlining taxation to fund his military campaigns, and strengthening the legal framework of the kingdom. Edward understood that a strong economy and efficient administration were essential for sustaining long-term military success. The crown's revenue systems, including customs duties, parliamentary subsidies, and levies, were meticulously organized under his guidance. In this sense, Edward III was not only a warrior but also a statesman, capable of balancing the demands of war with the needs of governance. Yet, Edward's ambitions were constantly tempered by the realities of Europe. The political landscape was fragile, and shifting allegiances could quickly undermine even the most careful strategies. Edward navigated this landscape with caution, often exploiting rivalries between French nobles, mediating disputes among allies, and maintaining a network of spies and informants to anticipate threats. His court in England became a center of intelligence and diplomacy, reflecting the king's belief that knowledge was as powerful a weapon as the sword. In addition to his continental campaigns, Edward III's reign had profound social and cultural impacts. The Black Death, which had ravaged Europe in the mid-14th century, had destabilized populations, but Edward encouraged economic recovery through support for agriculture, trade, and urban centers. He also promoted chivalric culture and knightly orders, culminating in the foundation of the Order of the Garter in 1348. This order, one of the most prestigious in Europe, symbolized Edward's vision of monarchy, a combination of martial excellence, loyalty, and noble honor. It became a lasting institution, reflecting both Edward's personal ideals and his desire to solidify the prestige of the English crown. Edward III's family life remained central to his reign. His children were not only heirs to the throne but also instruments of diplomacy. Marriages were arranged with continental houses to secure alliances and strengthen England's influence abroad. His sons, particularly the Black Prince, Edward of Woodstock, were trained in the art of warfare and governance, ensuring that Edward's legacy would endure. The king's attention to dynastic planning demonstrates his understanding that the stability of the kingdom depended not only on his reign but also on the preparation of future generations. Despite his remarkable achievements, Edward III's later reign faced mounting challenges. Prolonged warfare strained the economy and the population, leading to periods of unrest and rebellion. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381, although after Edward's death, had roots in the societal tensions that emerged during his campaigns and taxation policies. Nevertheless, Edward's ability to maintain authority, manage resources, and inspire loyalty among his nobles ensured that England remained a major European power throughout his 50-year reign. Edward III died on June 21, 1377, leaving a kingdom transformed. From a young king under the shadow of his mother and Roger Mortimer, he had become a monarch whose influence extended across Europe. His victories in France, his administrative reforms, and his cultivation of chivalric culture created a legacy that would shape English identity for generations. The 100 Years' War continued beyond his lifetime, but Edward's vision, strategy, and ambition laid the foundation for England's enduring presence on the continental stage. In retrospect, Edward III was more than a warrior or a king, he was a visionary leader who understood the delicate balance between force and diplomacy, ambition and prudence. His reign exemplifies the complexities of medieval kingship, where personal valor, political acumen, and dynastic foresight were all essential for survival and success. For modern audiences, Edward III's life offers a window into an era where kingdoms rose and fell on the skill, courage, and foresight of a single ruler, and where the consequences of their decisions resonated across generations. By the late 1350s and early 1360s, Edward III's reputation as a warrior king was firmly established. His victories at Crécy and Poitiers had demonstrated the effectiveness of disciplined infantry, the power of the longbow, and the strategic genius that distinguished him from many contemporaries. Yet, the war with France was far from over. Edward understood that conquest was a marathon, not a sprint, and that maintaining momentum required careful planning, both on the battlefield and in the corridors of power. The English campaigns in France were now characterized by strategic sieges and selective engagements rather than large-scale pitched battles alone. Edward recognized that control over key fortresses and towns could secure supply lines, project influence, and weaken the French monarchy's authority. Cities such as Calais, captured in 1347, became strategic hubs, allowing England to maintain a foothold on the continent for decades. Calais was more than a military prize, it was a symbol of England's enduring power in France, a testament to Edward's foresight and his ability to combine military action with long-term political objectives. Edward's approach to warfare also emphasized adaptability and intelligence. He established networks of spies and informants across France, ensuring that he could anticipate French movements and respond quickly. This was complemented by careful diplomacy. Edward cultivated alliances with disaffected French nobles, exploiting internal rivalries to England's advantage. By turning French factions against one another, he created opportunities for military action while minimizing the risks of direct confrontation with the full strength of the French crown. The king's understanding of strategy extended beyond military logistics. Edward meticulously managed the morale and loyalty of his troops, rewarding valor and ensuring that English soldiers felt valued and disciplined. The longbowmen, in particular, became legendary not only for their skill but also for their loyalty and effectiveness. Edward's ability to maintain a professional, motivated army allowed England to achieve victories even when heavily outnumbered, a recurring theme throughout his campaigns. Edward III's ambitions were not limited to northern France. His campaigns extended into Brittany, Flanders, and the Low Countries, regions whose strategic locations could influence the outcome of the war. By supporting allies and leveraging claims of feudal allegiance, Edward strengthened his continental position while simultaneously projecting English influence. These campaigns demonstrated a nuanced understanding of European politics. War was not merely about conquest, but about shaping alliances, creating leverage, and securing legitimacy. Meanwhile, France, under the rule of King John II and later Charles V, began to adapt to Edward's strategies. The French military leadership learned from past defeats, developing tactics to counter English archers and employing more flexible approaches to battlefield positioning. This evolving contest created a dynamic, ever-shifting landscape of conflict in which both sides constantly innovated. Edward, ever vigilant, responded by refining his strategies, demonstrating a remarkable capacity for learning and adaptation. On the home front, Edward III maintained a delicate balance between taxation, administration, and public support. War required enormous financial resources, and Edward skillfully negotiated with Parliament to secure funding while avoiding excessive unrest. He also oversaw the administration of justice, ensuring that the kingdom remained orderly despite the pressures of prolonged conflict. His governance style reflected a belief that the strength of the monarchy was inextricably linked to the well-being of the realm, a principle that guided many of his decisions throughout his reign. Edward's personal involvement in the war was a defining characteristic of his kingship. He led campaigns personally, inspiring loyalty among his nobles and soldiers alike. Unlike many rulers who delegated command, Edward's presence on the battlefield signaled his commitment and courage. This hands-on leadership not only boosted morale but also allowed him to make rapid, informed decisions during complex military engagements. His direct command reinforced the perception of Edward III as both a courageous warrior and a shrewd strategist. By the 1360s, the war had entered a phase of trench and siege warfare, characterized by careful positioning, selective battles, and negotiations for temporary truces. Edward used these pauses not only to consolidate territorial gains but also to plan the next stages of his campaigns. The king understood that victory was as much about timing and preparation as it was about direct combat. Each decision, each movement of troops, reflected a careful calculation of risk and reward, a hallmark of Edward's strategic mind. Edward III's reign, however, was not without controversy. His long campaigns imposed heavy burdens on the English population, from taxation to conscription. Moreover, the prolonged conflict created tension among the nobility, some of whom resented the king's assertive control over military and political matters. Edward's response was a combination of firm authority and careful negotiation, ensuring that dissent was managed without undermining his overall objectives. His ability to maintain loyalty, even in challenging times, was a testament to his political skill. Culturally, Edward III continued to shape the identity of English monarchy. The Order of the Garter, founded in 1348, was more than a ceremonial institution, it was a symbol of unity, loyalty, and chivalric values, reinforcing the ideals that Edward sought to project both at home and abroad. Through such initiatives, Edward cultivated an image of the crown that combined military prowess, noble dignity, and moral authority, a vision that resonated deeply with contemporaries and left a lasting legacy. As the 1360s progressed, Edward III had transformed England into a formidable continental power. His combination of military innovation, strategic diplomacy, and administrative acumen ensured that the kingdom could endure the pressures of prolonged warfare while maintaining domestic stability. The king's ability to balance ambition with pragmatism, courage with calculation, and leadership with diplomacy defined his reign and left an indelible mark on European history. As Edward III entered the final decades of his reign, England had been transformed. From a young king overshadowed by his mother and Roger Mortimer, he had emerged as one of Europe's most formidable rulers, a monarch whose ambition, strategy, and foresight left a lasting imprint on his kingdom and the continent. Yet the final years of Edward's reign were not only a reflection on past triumphs but also a careful management of succession, governance, and the stability of the realm. Edward's later years were marked by a shift in focus from direct military conquest to consolidation and diplomacy. Though England remained engaged in the ongoing conflicts of the 100 Years' War, Edward's personal role on the battlefield gradually diminished. Age and experience guided him to prioritize the administration of the kingdom, the training of his heirs, and the cultivation of alliances that would preserve England's position in Europe for generations. This period showcased Edward's adaptability, an understanding that true power was maintained not only through force but also through prudent governance and foresight. A central concern for Edward III was the preparation of his successors. The king's eldest surviving son, Edward, the Black Prince, had distinguished himself on the battlefield with remarkable skill, particularly at Poitiers, but he predeceased his father in 1376. This tragic turn forced Edward to consider his grandson, Richard, as heir. Edward's careful nurturing of his family's lineage reflected a sophisticated grasp of dynastic politics. The survival and legitimacy of the monarchy depended on clear succession, capable heirs, and strategic marriages that could secure alliances across Europe. Edward's attention to these matters ensured that the Plantagenet dynasty remained a stabilizing force despite the turbulence of war. Even as Edward's focus shifted toward governance, he remained deeply engaged with international diplomacy. His court continued to serve as a hub of negotiation, intelligence, and strategy. Treaties, truces, and marriage alliances were tools Edward wielded with the same precision as a sword on the battlefield. The king understood that England's position in Europe could not rely solely on military might, legitimacy, reputation, and influence were equally vital. In this sense, Edward III embodied a holistic vision of kingship, combining martial strength with political acumen, domestic authority with continental diplomacy. Edward also faced the challenge of maintaining domestic stability after decades of war. Prolonged campaigns had placed heavy financial and social burdens on the kingdom. The crown had relied extensively on taxation and forced levies, which risked alienating the nobility and commoners alike. Edward's solution was a combination of moderation, foresight, and engagement with Parliament. He ensured that the kingdom's resources were mobilized effectively while avoiding unnecessary rebellion, a delicate balance that underscored his administrative skill. Edward's ability to govern both the sword and the ledger was a hallmark of his enduring leadership. Culturally, Edward III's reign continued to shape the identity of English monarchy. He reinforced the ideals of chivalry, loyalty, and martial excellence through institutions like the Order of the Garter, which persisted as symbols of honor, prestige, and the moral authority of the crown. These cultural legacies complemented Edward's political and military achievements, creating a multifaceted kingship that combined power with principle, courage with wisdom. The culmination of Edward III's life came in 1377, after 50 years on the throne. He passed away on June 21, leaving a kingdom that had grown in strength, reputation, and influence. England's position in Europe, secured through decades of warfare and diplomacy, reflected the vision of a king who had understood both the potentials and the limits of power. His victories, his reforms, and his cultivation of dynastic stability had established a foundation upon which subsequent rulers would build, for better or worse. Edward's long reign also had profound implications for the structure of English monarchy and military practice. His emphasis on professional armies, disciplined archers, and strategic planning set precedents for future campaigns. The 100 Years' War, which continued beyond his lifetime, bore the imprint of his tactical innovations. Similarly, his attention to governance, fiscal administration, and dynastic security influenced the expectations and responsibilities of future English monarchs. In essence, Edward III redefined what it meant to be a medieval king in an era of shifting power dynamics, technological innovation, and international competition. Perhaps most importantly, Edward's reign left a human legacy, the embodiment of ambition tempered by strategy, courage tempered by prudence, and leadership guided by foresight. He had ascended the throne as a teenager in a kingdom shadowed by intrigue and internal strife, yet he transformed England into a continental power whose influence extended far beyond its shores. His life illustrates the delicate balance between personal ambition and national interest, between war and governance, and between fleeting victories and enduring legacy. For modern audiences, Edward III's story resonates as more than a historical account. It is a narrative of vision, resilience, and the complex demands of leadership. His victories and defeats, his triumphs and tragedies, offer a window into an era where kingship required mastery of both the sword and the state, where the fate of nations rested on decisions made in war rooms and council chambers alike. Edward III's life, spanning from 1312 to 1377, remains a testament to the enduring power of ambition guided by skill, intelligence, and the unyielding pursuit of legacy. In summary, Edward III's reign is remembered for the transformation of England into a military and political power in Europe. Innovations in warfare and administration that influenced generations. A sophisticated understanding of diplomacy, alliances, and dynastic politics. The cultivation of chivalric culture and institutions that reinforced royal prestige. A personal legacy that combined courage, strategy, and vision, leaving an indelible mark on English history. Edward III's death marked the end of an era, but the kingdom he shaped continued to influence Europe for decades. His life reminds us that history is often the story of individuals who, through courage, intellect, and ambition, leave a footprint that endures far beyond their own time. Edward III's life, spanning from 1312 to 1377, represents one of the most transformative periods in English and European history. From his tumultuous youth under the shadow of his father, Edward II, to his emergence as a visionary ruler and warrior king, Edward's reign illustrates the intricate interplay between ambition, strategy, and governance. In this final part, we explore the culmination of his life, the succession of his dynasty, and the enduring legacy that has shaped centuries of history. Edward III's reign was extraordinary not only in its duration but also in its scope. Over 50 years on the throne, he oversaw a kingdom facing internal strife, international conflict, and social upheaval. Early challenges, including the regency of his mother Isabella and Roger Mortimer, forced Edward to learn the art of leadership under pressure. These formative experiences shaped his understanding that kingship required more than courage; it demanded intelligence, strategic foresight, and an unflinching ability to act decisively when circumstances required. One of Edward's greatest achievements was his military innovation. The English longbow, a relatively simple weapon, became a cornerstone of his battlefield strategy, allowing disciplined forces to overcome numerically superior enemies. Victories at Crécy, 1346, and Poitiers, 1356, demonstrated not only the effectiveness of his armies but also Edward's tactical brilliance. These battles reshaped medieval warfare, emphasizing discipline, positioning, and innovation over sheer numbers and brute force. Edward's campaigns set precedents for military strategy that endured long after his death. Yet Edward III was more than a warrior. His reign was marked by a careful balance between war and governance. He implemented fiscal reforms, oversaw justice, and maintained parliamentary support to ensure the kingdom's stability. The burden of war required substantial resources, and Edward's ability to negotiate funding and manage taxation without provoking widespread rebellion highlights his political acumen. In Edward's view, a king's strength lay not only on the battlefield but also in the capacity to govern effectively and inspire loyalty among both nobles and commoners. Edward III's life stands as a testament to the enduring power of ambition guided by skill, intelligence, and vision. He transformed England from a kingdom vulnerable to internal strife and foreign challenge into a formidable European power. His victories, reforms, and institutions continue to echo through history, making Edward III not just a king of his time, but a figure whose influence resonates far beyond the 14th century. In conclusion, Edward III's reign reminds us that history is often shaped by the bold actions of visionary leaders. His story is a chronicle of courage, strategy, and foresight, a narrative that continues to captivate, educate, and inspire generations of scholars, enthusiasts, and audiences across the world. From the battlefields of France to the halls of Westminster, Edward III's legacy endures, a lasting testament to the power of leadership, ambition, and vision.